I am grateful to you for inviting me here for two reasons, really. One is because, as Rosamond has told you, my wife and I spent 2 very happy years at Ball State many, many years ago. We have many fine friends here, and we've not been back. And this is my first trip back. Jane hasn't been back at all. So it was a real pleasure to get in here at 5 o'clock this afternoon and have a little time between then and now to see some of these old friends and see a very different campus from what we knew in those days. It gives me great pleasure. Your invitation gave me great pleasure on another score, however. It gave me an excuse, I suppose is the word, to prepare the remarks that I'm going to obtrude on you in a moment. These thoughts on planning for university libraries have been based on many years of experience halfway between a faculty member and an administrator, both as a faculty member and an administrator. I've appreciated this unique view of the academic life that's available only to librarians, really, because faculty members look on them as administrators and administrators look on them as faculty members. Neither molests them much. We have a good opportunity, I think, to see things that are difficult sometimes for other people around a university to see. I'm reminded, I should have checked this reference because as I was thinking about it, I was reminded of Hetty Hutter. I believe that's the name. Anybody read Cooper's The Deer Slayer within historical times? Wasn't it Hetty Hutter who was the feeble-minded girl who was allowed to walk unmolested into the council fires of the Mohawk Indians or whatever? Well, this is the way we librarians sometimes feel. The administration accepts us and the faculty accepts us. Nobody's quite sure why we're on either side. I have enjoyed this. I feel completely ambidextrous, filling one role and the other with total impunity. I figured up that I've got exactly 35 years of experience living in this middle position, and that's not bad for a 47-year-old man. But it is 35 years experience because for 8 years in my professional life, I was the director of a thing called the Joint University Libraries in Nashville, Tennessee, where I was a faculty member and an administrator on 3 faculties concurrently. And believe me, I lived that role on all 3 faculties concurrently. It was a 168-hour-a-week job to be a faculty member and administrator on 3 faculties at the same time. Throughout the years, therefore, these 35 years, my thoughts on this subject have been taking shape. But it required the stimulus of this invitation from Ball State to force me, I guess, to put my remarks into some kind of disciplined, coordinated, ordered fashion and to structure them into a concept or conceptualize them into a structure. Consequently, I'm going to take the liberty of reading the remarks I'm going to give you this evening. After I'm through reading, we can talk or not talk or do anything else you want to do, but I am going to read to you now. So, sit and listen to this tale. Talking about planning in university libraries, the context and the processes. Increasing attention is being directed in recent years toward the matter of long-range planning in university libraries. Most of it in the nature of jeremiads upon its jeremiads upon the plight in store for libraries that do not shore up their planning efforts, and animadversions upon its shortcomings. Some of this recent increase results simply from the growing awareness on the part of librarians of the inadequacy of past planning efforts. But much also comes clearly out of the same fortunate confluence of library and management science that is producing so many other innovations and improvements in the administration of libraries. It is important to note that today's concept of planning came into the general arena of management theory only a scant decade ago. Simple though it may sound, recognition of planning as an impersonal organizational structure for determining future action was not postulated until 1961. Planning, in this modern sense, was wrapped almost immediately into the evolving congeries of general management techniques, and it made its way quite promptly across the traditional disciplinary lines, which are never easy barriers to surmount, into the area of library administration. A full-fledged dissertation on planning in libraries was underway within 5 years, Within 6 or 7 years, a number of large libraries had begun to codify and articulate their long-range objectives, and before the decade was out, this was the decade of the 60s, several libraries had established planning offices within their administrative branches. It's brand new. Now, much of this recent initial work toward long-range planning in libraries has been primitive, it's been tentative, and based upon fallacious or questionable assumptions, traditions, and methodologies. In fairness, however, it must be observed that these same weaknesses have, to a greater or lesser degree, characterized the modern planning efforts of a host of other industries as well, both in the public and in the private sectors. Indeed, it would be difficult to point to an organization anywhere that has thus far developed a strategic planning mechanism wholly commensurate with its needs. Probably all in existence would range somewhere along the lower half of an adequacy scale. It is therefore to the credit of the library profession, I believe, that such planning efforts have at least begun here. Hopefully, they will continue to develop in sophistication and utility as valuable library management tools. A landmark survey was made in 1970 of management problems in university libraries. The surveyors were the consulting firm of Booz Allen Hamilton, under contract to the Association of Research Libraries and the American Council of Education on Education. In their report, Booz Allen Hamilton rightly pointed as one of 8 major problem areas in university library management to, and I quote, the need for more comprehensive library planning and budgeting systems which for the near and longer term specify 1, the role and requirements of the library in relation to the academic program of the university, 2, the library's objectives and plans in support of academic programs, and 3, the library resources, financial, personnel, physical materials, facilities, and equipment needed to implement agreed-upon plans. End of quote. Now, this is indeed a high-priority need, deserving of the attention of the best minds both within and outside of the academic library community. To be meaningful, however, it will have to take into account certain uniquenesses and requisite or essential idiosyncrasies of the academic establishment, especially the frequently misunderstood nature of academic decision-making itself. University library programs, the BAH report reminded, must proceed out of, rather than lead, university academic programs. It seems reasonable to propose, therefore, that since library programs are determined by academic programs, library planning must follow academic planning. Therein, however, lies a dilemma for the librarian who would devise a modern long-range plan, because it is probably fair to say that no university in the country has an academic planning mechanism at all, in the sense that the word planning is used today in management science. Moreover, it is probably true that anyone who even expects universities, as we have known them in the past, to establish structured planning systems similar to other industries simply does not understand the nature of a university. Except in a most tenuous and superficial sense, academic decision-making in a university is not accomplished through the organizational tree that we have come to associate with large organizations. Such a structure does exist in universities, but it exists for non-academic decisions. Academic decisions are accomplished elsewhere. They are rather initiated and made by faculty members as individuals, with practically no centralized control over them. This is not to say that there is anarchy. Surprisingly, there is not, although there are certainly anarchic characteristics in academic decision-making. Rather, in good universities, a fairly well-balanced series of checks are built into faculty decisions. First of all, the initial shaping of an academic decision by an individual faculty member is much influenced by peer consensus, and thereafter major decisions must suffer peer approval. A faculty decision can also be vetoed by the university administration at any point, at any of a number of subsequent points in the paraphernalia of authorization. The administration can never veto a faculty decision, however, on the basis of academic considerations. Academic considerations are the prerogative of the faculty to evaluate. Administration veto can be based only upon extraneous issues, inadequate space, inadequate funds, or such other factors usually thought by faculty to be irrelevant, casuistic, petty, and obstructionist. Sometimes they are. Administrators, of course, have pawns that they can play when faced with academic decisions they do not like. They can so freight them down in implementing channels that they will never again see the light of day. They can lobby in the faculty forum to have decisions rescinded. They can elicit veto at the trustee level, an operation that no faculty member clearly understands anyway. And they can delay, and they can obfuscate, and they can manipulate, and they can trade off, and they can offer an unacceptable half loaf. Most experienced administrators have had on one occasion or another to use all of these and many other devices to keep from implementing academic decisions which they felt were not in the best interests of the university. Yet, they cannot use them too often, nor too obviously, because the faculty has its bag of tricks as well. The faculty, after all, controls the agenda, so it can keep bringing up vetoed programs in new guises and under new rubrics until finally someday when the administration is looking the other way they can slip through. Or they can wait out or precipitate a change to a more sympathetic administration. Deans, after all, and even presidents, serve only by the sufferance of the faculty and can be deposed when they are thought by enough faculty members to be intolerable. In the meantime, of course, faculty members can simply implement decisions individually in their classrooms without benefit of administrative approbation or revised course descriptions in the catalog. And finally, as the unkindest cut of all, they can and do simply leave for another university where they believe their decisions will remain more frequently intact. Thus, the decision-making relationship between a university faculty and its administration is most likely to be a friendly standoff with a very delicate system of checks and balances to preserve it. When the checks are in proper measure, so that neither side is dominatable by the other, a fine, productive friction can take place that benefits the entire enterprise. Imbalance, however, in either direction is injurious. A strong faculty with a weak administration tends to make a university insufferably self-righteous and too divorced from the real world, while a weak faculty dominated by a strong administration leads to a moribund or sterile academic program. For this reason, faculty generally find it distasteful to contemplate academic planning at all, thinking with some validity that planning is inimical to innovation and suppressive of creativity. They prefer rather the adventure of academic buccaneering, of being able to move swiftly where the opportunity lies, or where the inspiration occurs, or where the need is identified, or where grant money can be got. The very concept of planning, they argue, is antithetical to the nature of a university. The root meaning of the word, after all, universitas, is all-embracing. A university is presumed to be a place where a man can study anything that pleases him without being restrained or delayed in his efforts by some predetermined plan as to which of all possible interests are appropriate to the university and which are not. Because of faculty distaste for planning, plus the fact that academic decisions originate with the faculty, little, if any, academic planning ever actually takes place. Individual faculty members may have plans, indeed they should have plans, but the only restrictions a faculty member is ever willing to impose is in someone else's discipline, never in his own. Thus, faculty consensus can never be attained on constraints and is consequently never sought. The faculty plan is no plan, or perhaps more accurately is God's universal plan with no restrictions. The administration, on the other hand, lacking the power of program initiation, can at best have a negative plan, comprising only constraints, most of which the administration knows down deep it could never really make stick if the contest were ever truly drawn. For this reason, administrations frequently speak generally of the need for constraints upon the program, although they seldom announce specifically what those restraints are, lest the faculty interpret the announcement as a challenge to combat, a combat in which the administration would be almost sure to lose. Harvey Branscombe was at his pragmatic best when he reminded that there has probably never in history been a university faculty that could not get what it wanted if it cried loud enough. It is currently popular for the press and for public officials and others in the public eye to castigate university administrators for not keeping their universities under control. Such criticisms manifest sophomoric understanding of this unique characteristic of a university, because presidents have never had and never will have their universities under control. The late E.R. Guthrie once proposed a happy, although exaggerated simile when he observed that, quote, "The relation of a college president to his faculty is like the relation of a watchman on the end of a dock to the seagulls circling overhead," end of quote. There is no exaggeration, however, in Barnaby Keeney's simple description of the same phenomenon. No matter what anyone tells a good professor to do, he said, he will do and teach just about what he wishes, and if he is pestered too much, he will simply go away. Considering, then, this inherent faculty thrust to embrace all things within the purview of the academic program, juxtaposed against clear recognition by most administrations that no university can any longer strive to sustain such universality of program, how indeed does the conscientious librarian plan an appropriate course of development for the university library? Even data for negative planning cannot be got. Tell me one thing, however narrow it may be, the librarian can say to his administration, that this university will never offer a program in, and I will begin to develop a library plan. Oh, there are many things that this university will never go into, the administrator replies. But what, says the librarian? 7th century Albanian corn production? Polynesian epigraphy? Will this university ever have a program in Polynesian epigraphy? If not, the library can begin now to specialize by absolutely eliminating it from its collection policy. Oh, I doubt, the administrator vacillates, that we would ever have a program in Polynesian epigraphy. Do not tell me what you doubt. Will it or won't it? Well, I can't imagine what the university would ever do. Well, and so it goes. The librarian returns to his office after this feckless colloquy, ruminates long about the admonishments he has just received that the university can no longer be all things to all men, plays his hunch, cancels all subscriptions to journals in Polynesian epigraphy, and marches off to the cocktail party to meet the new faculty appointee in the sociology department. 2 martinis later, he heads home for dinner, shaken at having learned that the new man is the world's leading figure in, of all things, Polynesian epigraphy. Experienced librarians can multiply such anecdotes almost in perpetuity. Yet, exasperating though they may be, they can only in a naive sense be thought to represent weaknesses in the university administration. The administration cannot give better guidance because the university administration cannot know the future of the academic program. In the historically received concept of a university, an administration has no rightful place in the determination of academic program. The only function of a university president, overstates one faculty member, is to answer the mail that comes addressed just to the university. Another allows a more expansive role. The president, he feels, should be only an executive secretary to the Council of Deans. Discounted for overstatement, this is to say that the role of a good administration in a traditional university is one of facilitating implementation of a faculty-determined and therefore unrestricted program, which is of itself no small responsibility. Despite the apparent hopelessness of this situation, however, there is a valuable source of planning data available in the university to help diligent librarians chart the long-term future of their operations, a source that they long ago learned to tap handily. It is comprehensive, it is continuing, it is endowed with immediate and unrelenting feedback on missteps and errors. It is the aforementioned faculty cocktail party, together with its myriad transmogrifications, the coffee clutch, the lunch at the faculty club, the hour at the golf course or on the squash court, indeed any place where individual librarians and individual faculty members meet and talk informally. Since the individual faculty member is the fountainhead of university academic planning, it is a wise librarian who looks there for input to his own plan as well. There is no more lonely person on earth than the scholar afire with the excitement of his discovery of the moment about which no one else in the world seems to care. The librarian who comes around from time to time and with genuine concern and interest talks with him about his work is doing more than performing a humanitarian service by sharing the man's enthusiasm for his field. He is also gaining information to go into the library plan. He is finding out what the scholar feels he must do on his next sabbatic leave. He is learning how he has been frustrated in his research efforts to date and how he proposes to circumvent such frustrations in the future. He is sensing out the direction in which the man is likely to be nudging the research of his graduate students next year and the year after that. And he's learning what new courses or syllabi are beginning to take shape in the faculty member's mind, although they may not be reflected in the college catalog for another 5 years. It is with such grassroots information as this that library planning must begin. The most valuable such information, moreover, is not likely to be got from senior scholars. The cynic will say that this is because they have already been brainwashed by the system, or inured to its inadequacies, or simply that they are no longer productive. But that interpretation is over-harsh. It is rather more likely that the alert library got their input and built upon it 5 or 10 years earlier, so that their current needs are already being satisfied to a greater degree. The best long-range planning information is therefore more likely to be forthcoming from productive associate professors and from those vigorous assistant professors whose current performance seems to be pointing them toward tenure appointments in the next year or two. Here is grist for the library planner's mill. Libraries can and do build sensitive planning mechanisms upon such information, brought to them though it may be from a multiplicity of sources through myriad tentacles. All librarians with faculty contacts serve as unique antennae through which units of information can be received, some of great importance, some of small importance, but all of some importance. A well-run library will assure that all such information is fed on a structured basis into a central intelligence system where it can be noted, winnowed, evaluated against other input, and acted upon as appropriate on a continuing basis. Libraries with best planning effectiveness, of course, also strive to establish similar listening posts within the power structure of the administration. They seek to appraise the unannounced likes and dislikes of key administrative officers, so as to predict as accurately as possible the likelihood of this or that new faculty aspiration being shot down when its turn comes to be submitted for official approbation. Information of this kind must also be put into the library planning system and applied against the input from faculty sources, so as to minimize the number of false starts. It is wasteful for the library to act in accord with an anticipated faculty need that is destined from the beginning to be interred by an unsympathetic administration. In its evaluation of information from both faculty and administration, the well-run library also takes care to eliminate or reduce the accidents of input, the freaks and flukes that come into any net, such as the research plans of a scholar who will probably leave the university within the next 18 months anyway, or whose enthusiasms the library knows from experience are likely to be short-lived, or whose new aspirations lie in the center of a vast area of library weakness from which there is no reasonable hope of recovery. All such considerations must be weighed carefully in the planning mechanism so that appropriate and balanced future action can be charted. Where error is necessary, however, it should probably be in the direction of program extension rather than of program restriction, because although administrations come and administrations go, it is the nature of the university faculty that its expansionist tendencies will go on forever. Its needs will always extend to the very bounds of human curiosity itself, and it will brook no hindrance in its drive to see them satisfied. Well, what then is done with the library plan so evolved? Modern management theory says that it should be placed before the entire university community for understanding and adoption. But in the past, most libraries have found this to be the most difficult step of all to accomplish. In fact, most seem to have decided that it is, except in very rare cases, impossible to do. When it is borne in mind that the significant inputs to the library plan are gleaned almost through an undercover intelligence network from such circumstantial sources as hearsay, as things unsaid rather than said, as raised eyebrows and twitching lips, and from remarks made in absolute confidence by one of two opposing factions of the community, faculty and administration, that are essentially locked in endless combat, it would appear foolhardy for the librarian to lay his plan on the line publicly, or even to permit so little as a glimpse of it by either the faculty or the administration. Indeed, it would seem to be of dubious wisdom even to admit that he has a plan. Likelihood is high that he would be treated with the same degree of tenderness as a man who tries to break up a quarrel between a man and wife. He would also immediately lose all of his future effectiveness as a planner, because he would have divulged things told to him in confidence. Input to his plan, which in order to be valuable must be continuing, would immediately cease totally. No one confides in a blabbermouth, especially the second time around. So here then is an apparent irony. The only coordinated long-range plan in the university, and it must remain in perpetuity locked in the librarian's bottom desk drawer, where only he and his colleagues have access to it. Although such plans have seldom been written down, most of the better university libraries have always had them. Their librarians have resolutely and doggedly, albeit with seeming aimlessness, plotted their forward motion from them day after month, after year, after decade, self-confident that they are possessed withal of a unique and invaluable understanding of their institution's future. University librarians have not always been fully conscious of this planning process as it was occurring. For this reason, they have not always been as careful as they might be about structuring the process into their organizations. And they've grumbled a lot about the infrequency with which they have been taken into university policy councils. Their major source of information on university decisions, they have asserted, is the morning newspaper. Well, without question, all of these things need to be improved, and it is to that valid goal that the Booz Allen Hamilton recommendation on planning addresses itself. Yet it would be a serious error to believe that university policies are made in councils. They are only confirmed in councils after months and years of decentralized jellification. And it is during that process of jellification that librarians should, and usually have, begun developing and implementing their plans. When well carried out, this planning mechanism, primitive though it may sound when described, has all but one of the requirements identified by management scientists as essential to an effective planning program. It is comprehensive in scope, it is orderly in nature, it is open-ended in continuity, sensitive to feedback, and it is action-oriented. It lacks only in that it is not, indeed some would say cannot be, widely understood by the traditional university community. The proof of the pudding, however, is in the eating, and when a university library has over a period of time enjoyed a reputation for giving good service, faculty and administration alike are usually disposed to assume that some kind of plan for it must have existed somewhere. Thank you. You want me to stand up here, Rosamond? Let people shoot at me? Okay, very good. This or anything else? Come on, if you don't ask a question, I will. Yes, sir.
I have a question. This may be rather simplistic, but in your talk you mentioned primarily faculty and administration. What role do you feel that students need, particularly away from set academic patterns, have in shaping planning?
I guess I don't really feel they have a place in library planning. Now that'll open up some questions, don't you think? I guess I feel that the function of a university library is to serve as the tool room for the employees of the university. This is where they get the bookish instruments with which they do the work they're employed to do. And this is to teach and to research. I guess I don't really see a role of a library beyond that limited scope. Now I'm generalizing here unconscionably, really, because every library must do more than that. But I think that the minute a library begins to extend itself very far beyond that very limited concept, then I believe it's opening itself up to some very substantial and will receive very substantial and virulent criticism from the university administration and faculty alike for misusing university funds. Who told them to go out there and do that? And I think that what a library has to do, if it's going to render any kind of service beyond what is required by the academic program, I think it has to do it surreptitiously, sub rosa, undercover, without letting it be shown, be seen very, very widely. Somebody want to argue with that? I'm sure. Come on. Yes, ma'am. I guess it's difficult for me to conceive any good university library with a vigorous, active faculty that would, whereas the books required by the students are not very substantially already supplied, already there. Now, I say this. I realize that this is not always true, because there is a kind of literature that libraries have not been very good at getting hold of. But this is a very, very small portion of the library budget or the library energies required to pick this up. At Cornell University libraries, we spend about $1.75 million for books. There is a kind of I don't even know what to call it. I don't like to call it underground literature, but literature that is available only through non-conventional sources. Is that a way to say it? Of which we could get all there is in the country for the expenditure of $10,000. Now, $10,000 over $1.75 million is a very small fraction, and this is the reason I'm downplaying it. You see, I think that almost all the books students can need will already be in a university library because the faculty needs them for their work too. Yes, sir.
Where do middle managers fit into your concept of
middle managers and top managers and bottom managers all fit into this. They're all people who have contacts with faculty out there. These informal kinds of contacts. I think these are much more important to the input of a library than the formal contacts. I'm in favor of faculty-student library committees, let's say, or these formal channels. They have to be developed. But I do feel that only a very small percent, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6% of the input that the library needs to run on is got through these formal channels. All librarians comprise this information network. So middle managers are very much involved in this whole operation. They are the people who have to do their part in gathering this information. They're the people who have to sit in on the councils in which it is evaluated. They're the ones who have to participate in the determination of the action that is to be taken or not taken in the face of this input. They are the decision-making. All librarians comprise the decision-making body of a library. Yes, sir.
What do you see as the role of media in an academic library, other media than books?
I see the role of other media as being the same role as the role of books, but simply extended beyond what books can convey. I don't see any unique mission to non-book media. I think they are an extension of the conventional information transfer medium, but I don't see them having a special role.
Do you think they should be housed in the university library?
Yes, sir. Yes, I do. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Do you accept the theory of management by exception?
No, not. I don't think so. Maybe I don't know what that means exactly.
It means that you don't interfere in the operation of the department unless you get a danger signal.
Oh, yes, sir. I do believe that. I don't interfere in the I don't make decisions in operating departments. I can lean real hard, But I figure that those people can lean right back on me. I believe that unless we put somebody in charge of an operation and leave him alone to make his own mistakes, he's not going to learn. And I can give him all the reasons that I can think of for his not doing for his doing things his way rather than mine. And if I don't convince him, then I haven't convinced him. He's got to go off and fall on his face and find out for himself, or else I learn I'm wrong. So yes, I believe in pretty substantial self-determination within departments. I do believe, however, that when we're talking now, this is talking about implementing action. When we're talking about policy determination, standard determination, the broader problems of library policy, it seems to me that what we have to have here is total input from the entire professional staff of the library. That I don't determine standards for my library. I don't determine objectives and goals. These have to be determined by the entire professional staff. But once agreed upon, then by George, we have to count on the entire professional staff to see that they're implemented as well. And this sometimes means that a department head may find himself implementing something that he's against because the weight of his peers' opinion is against him. Yes, sir.
With your expressed desires here, would you prefer requests or orders, written requests or orders coming from your faculty, or would you more rely on specific contacts by your staff, more or less feeding into them?
I think that you must have both. I think that depending upon a couple of factors, one of which is the traditional way of doing business within the university. The other is the effectiveness, the degree of the effectiveness of this informal communication mechanism that I've described. It seems to me that a library that has a very effective such mechanism can determine 80-90% of what the book needs of the faculty are going to be before the books are ever produced. By keeping in close personal contact with the man, knowing what his aspirations are, his frustrations have been, knowing how his mind is thinking, what kinds of things he's attacking, we can go ahead as librarians and buy most of these books before he ever even hears that they're published and have them on the shelf by the time he first hears about them. But always I think we must rely on him to round out our selection, to add to it where we have missed, to tell us where we're wrong, to come in and say, why'd you buy this dog? This one's a real loser, But I think that we can afford to lose a few on this. It's cheaper for us to buy 1,000 books, of which 950 are good ones and 50 are bad, and just leave the 50 bad ones on the shelf, but learn every time we make a mistake, than it is to sit back and wait for the professor to come in with 1,000 written requests here. So I believe that a library can select and purchase a very substantial percentage of the books needed by the faculty, but never, I don't believe it can ever assume the full responsibility. It must always be responsible back to the faculty and be willing to learn and accept correction and adjustment on a continuing basis. Yes, ma'am.
When you say faculty, are any of these members of the faculty to be subject specialists, or just all members of the faculty aware of what would be required?
I think of all faculty members as subject specialists. Do you not? Maybe are there other kinds? Yes, I'm assuming that every faculty member is a specialist in his field. And I think that librarians can be subject trained in great depth and have substantial experience. But one scholar, no matter how scholarly he is, can never fully understand the scholarship of the other man. And I think that scholar librarians cannot fully understand. We can only increase the percentage of adequacy here from 80 to 90 to 94 to 96 to 97 to 97 and a half. But we'll never quite make it, will we? Yes, sir.
I'm concerned with how a small staff or a staff which has many demands on many regular demands, processing, cataloging, all this, can keep track of a large growing faculty, would you suggest any devices, like maybe a file or some kind of, profile of faculty?
I think if we start bogging ourselves down in files, we'll never make it. I think what we have to do is develop as good understanding of the broad parameters of this man's work, both his positive concerns and his negative concerns, and sort of shoot within those broad concepts. There's such a thing as an overexpensive but highly effective selection mechanism. I remember at one university where I went many years ago, there in the medical library, we had a faculty committee that selected all the books that went into the medical library. Once a week, 12 high-priced doctors sat down around a table and spent 5 hours deciding whether we'd buy this $5 book or that $5 book. And I just cringed, because here was the university spending $629 worth of high-priced time once a week to select $40 worth of books. We scrapped the committee and started buying $600 worth of books every week, and the university still came out ahead. And I think that we can do this, as I said, buy a few dogs once in a while, but generally come out with a better library because of it. And I don't think we're doing bad selection. I think we're doing good selection when we do a thing like that.
You would then place a high degree of reliance on such things as blanket orders and gathering plans.
Yes, with caution, I would. I think that there are too many people getting in the act of blanket ordering, and I think it just sounds like we get all the books on something, Well, that's not selection, I don't think. But there are competent selectors who can and who make a serious and capable effort to interpret the guidelines. What you do in a case like that is take the guidelines from the faculty and hand them on to the supplier. And often the suppliers can do sometimes the suppliers can do a pretty good job. You always have return rights on any gathering plan I've ever seen. So yes, I believe that sometimes these can be very effectively used, but I don't want just generally to condone them.
Specify a pattern gathering plan or blanket order.
Yes.
From certain dealers or certain fields or something.
Right, but we can't just say I want all the English books on sociology. It has to be more specific than that, and it can be. Some of them can do a very, very fine selection job if you give them the parameters. But if they miss, either you're not giving them good parameters, or else they're not the kind of people you want to do business with. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes, sir. I think that libraries will become increasingly mechanized, both by computers and other mechanical devices, and I think they have to. Whether or not a librarian should become a computer expert, I don't know. I think that there ought to be a few of these people around who are both computer people and librarians. But I don't believe that the general librarian needs to be a computer expert. I think that the general librarian needs to know enough about computers so that he can identify the kinds of problems which computers can better resolve than manual systems. And he should know where to go to buy the expertise he needs to design such a system. This is like, let's compare it. This is like a staff service in a university that is small enough so it doesn't require full-time staff service. Let's say a small university that retains a university counsel, a university attorney. And it's a small university, and they don't need to consult an attorney all the time, so they have him on a retainer, and he shows up once in a while when they've got a problem. By the time the university gets big, they've got a resident attorney, or 2 or 3 or 4. And I think that most libraries find themselves in somewhat the same situation as regards computers. The smaller libraries do need computerization, but to have a full-time computer librarian on the staff is a waste of talent. When they need something done on the computer, they can go buy this expertise from a service bureau. Have it designed, have somebody come in once a week and look at it and make sure it's running all right. It's cheaper than having the man on your own staff. I think the same thing is true of all kinds, not all kinds, but many kinds of management techniques. I don't believe that librarians need to immerse themselves and become expert in all of these different techniques. What they must do, however, is become sufficiently acquainted with those techniques and the kinds of problems that they can solve handily, so as to know when to have them implemented by an outside consultant or whatever else, per diem appointee. Yes, sir.
Excuse me, but would you mind repeating the question when it was asked to you?
I will. Yes, sir. The question was, what are my views about library computerization and the need for librarians to understand more than they do now about computers? I think that what we're coming into, isn't it, is a time when not only librarians have to know more about computers, but we'll have to know more about computers just to go to the grocery store and drive our automobile and do everything else. This is what's happening, I think. Yes, sir.
How deeply are you involved in the process of personnel selection for your library?
How deeply am I personally? Well, we've got a big library. It's Marty Martin. I see two people here who have been on the Cornell University library staff. We have about 130 librarians and about 270 full-time clerical staff and about 250 student assistants at any given time. So we're talking about a payroll of 650 people. I don't interview them all. I don't really involve myself substantially in personnel selection. I interview all professional appointments to the staff, but I do not make decisions on those. The decisions are made by the department head or in consultation with the associate director and the personnel officer. My view is sought, and I put it in, and sometimes they disagree with me, and we make the appointment. I try, however, to involve myself heavily in the determination of personnel policies.
There have been a lot of things, this is off the subject, there have been a lot of things going on with regard to reorganization and talk about new planning with the ALA, and you know that you've been involved with the people and the policies. Would you care to say something about this late development range, you know, what may be happening this summer?
Yes, we've been trying to find a new suit of clothes for the ALA for some time now. I think of it as a suit of clothes because I'm sorry. The question, Ray, was that Rosemond asks, what's the future of ALA? How is it going to be reorganized? What's likely to be happening in ALA? And so forth. I think that a couple of years ago we were about ready to throw the baby out with the bath. I think that a lot had become wrong with ALA, primarily because it had grown too big for its organizational structure and the traditional communication channels that we've been using within it. There had been in many people's minds the development of a kind of Mandarin element that seemed to be making all the decisions in ALA. This may or may not have been true. I was participating in those decisions, so I can't really agree with that, you know. But there were many people a year or two ago who were inclined to say, well, let's just scrap ALA because it's obviously in trouble. As I said, I think of this as buying a new suit of clothes for ALA. I don't throw my 9-year-old son out of the house just because he won't fit into the same summer pants this year that he wore last year. We set about figuring out the size and shape of a new pair of pants for him. And this is what I think we must do as librarians with ALA. It's our organization. It's not theirs, whoever they are. It's the American Library Association is a peer assembly, and it's only as good as we make it. And if we sit around and grumble about it off there somewhere isn't any good, well, the reason it isn't any good is because we're not making it good. And I think this has been a big part of the problem, is that there's been a tendency to assume that it has some unique integrity unto itself rather than involving each and every one of us. So I think that increasingly this view is coming to be recognized, and I think that there is I think that the structure of ALA will change considerably. I don't know quite what structure it will take. As you may know, Akanda has proposed a couple of concepts for ALA discussion, one being the conversion of ALA to a federation of pretty autonomous smaller associations, and then another, which I'm a little vague on myself, which it calls a triad structure, which is a group of assemblies of persons interested in particular common concerns. I expect that something like one or the other of these two concepts will be implemented following, or begin to be implemented following the next ALA conference. These have been discussed now for about a year. I think everybody's tired of discussing it and is ready to see if we can't do something about it now. But no, I have a lot of hope for ALA. I think there's a lot of life in the old doll yet. I sort of like her, you know. Yes, sir.
What if we talk about education for librarianship? Administrators is really finally involved in selecting people for professional positions. What kinds of changes would you like to see in education for librarianship to prepare people for their job?
Well, sir, I think that library schools are turning out pretty good people now. I know that I have colleagues in other libraries who insist that the library schools are not doing a good job. I think this says something about them as individuals rather than about the library schools, however. I think that many years ago, library schools used to stress, as some of us are old enough to remember, the details of librarianship, and I remember I used to have to type cards and type cards and type cards and type cards, and I used to have to learn to put paper clips on from the side of the cards instead of from the top, and all these crazy things, you know. Well, this was librarianship. And I think that what we have moved to from this is a much better, much more profound understanding of the functions, the purposes, the social responsibilities of libraries, the philosophy of librarianship, the theory of librarianship. And I like this ever so much better. When we get people out of the library schools and put them to work in our shop, then we can teach them to put the paper clips on the side. You know, we don't have to send somebody to library school to learn that. And I think that what people are learning in library school today, which we didn't necessarily learn a long, long time ago, was the importance, was to pick up the theoretical framework in which they can continue to learn for the rest of their lives. Because anybody who thinks that he's going to take a master's degree in librarianship and be qualified to do something for the next 40 years of his life, he is kidding himself. Because like anything else these days, librarianship is moving so fast that anybody who doesn't learn constantly is going to find himself obsolescent within 3 years' time, and he might just as well quit and get out now because he's going to be blocking up the bibliothetical stream here, it seems to me. What we must do is create people who will go on learning 168 hours a week for the rest of their lives. And I think the library schools are preparing young people today better to do this than some had done formerly. I think it did have many trade school characteristics a long time ago. And I think these have been to a large degree eliminated. Yes, sir. What happened to the manpower shortage? It isn't with us now, is it? No. Well, you can ask this same question in many fields, Ray, can't you? Because I don't think that this is something unique to librarianship. This is we can attribute it to whatever we want to attribute it to. The funding available to educational enterprises is just not very substantial today, and we were tooled up for a continuing expansion of the market. And all at once we find out that society doesn't have the money to buy that continuing expansion. And how we're going to cut back on our productive capability. We've got excess capacity in the plant now. And what we're going to do with these products out there, it's going to be interesting to try to find out. I'm not troubled about this yet. I think that we have enough positions to absorb all the librarians who are coming out of the schools this year and next. I think that librarian who wants only to be a special librarian in Altoona, Pennsylvania, may have trouble finding his job. But I think anyone who considers himself a member of the profession and has fairly general parameters on on the job possibilities available for him, I think you'll find a good job. Rosamond, why don't you come take this microphone away from me? Thank you very much.
Otherwise,